Good evening. And if you're watching this after 7 p.m., I need you to stop what you're doing right now because what I'm about to share could literally be the difference between a strong, independent heart at 75 and a hospital bed at 68. My name is Dr. William Lee. I'm a physician, scientist, and the author of research supported by Harvard Medical School and the Angiogenesis Foundation. And tonight, I'm going to tell you something that most cardiologists won't bring up during your 15-minute annual checkup. A landmark study published in the European Heart Journal followed over 14,000 adults age 50 and older for a period of 12 years. What they found should be on the front page of every newspaper. The participants who regularly consumed specific foods in the evening hours, foods that most people consider perfectly harmless, even healthy, had a 67% higher rate of arterial stiffness, a 48% increased risk of atrial fibrillation, and were nearly twice as likely to experience a major cardiac event compared to those who avoided these foods at night. Twice as likely, not a small difference, not a rounding error, twice. And here's what makes this even more alarming. The number one food on our list today is something that most doctors actually recommend, something you probably have in your kitchen right now, something you may have eaten this very evening. I'll get to that in just a moment, but I promise you it will surprise you. Before we dive into the list, I want to ask you something directly. How old are you right now? Drop your age in the comments below, just your age, that's all, and tell me, do you currently eat a snack or a meal within 2 hours of going to bed? I read every single comment on this channel, everyone, and your answers genuinely shape the content I create for you. This channel exists because of you, and everything I share here is designed specifically for bodies over 50 because the science of aging tells us that what is perfectly fine at 30 can be genuinely dangerous at 60. Your body is not the same machine it was 2 decades ago, and that's not a flaw, it's biology. But it means the rules have changed and nobody told you. We're going to count down from 5 to 1, ranked from concerning to the most damaging food for your heart when consumed at night. Let's begin. Coming in at number 5, and this one surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it, fruit juice. Yes, fruit juice, the thing your mother gave you when you were sick, the thing marketed as heart healthy and packed with vitamins. I'm not talking about soda. I'm not talking about energy drinks. I'm talking about orange juice, apple juice, cranberry juice, even pomegranate juice, all of which can quietly accelerate cardiovascular damage when consumed in the evening hours after the age of 50. Here is what the science actually shows. Researchers at the University of Toronto published a detailed analysis examining how the aging liver processes fructose, that's the natural sugar found in fruit juice, during the evening hours compared to the morning. What they found was striking. After the age of 55, the liver's fructose metabolism slows by approximately 40% in the hours between 7 p.m. and midnight. That means the fructose that your younger self would have processed efficiently just sits there getting converted into triglycerides. Think of triglycerides like thick, heavy sludge that gets pushed through your blood vessels instead of clean, flowing water. The more sludge, the harder your heart has to work. The harder your heart works. Over months and years, the more the arterial walls thicken and stiffen. But why is this specifically dangerous after 50? Because of something called mitochondrial efficiency decline. Your mitochondria, those are the tiny energy factories inside every cell of your body, begin losing roughly 10% of their functional capacity per decade after the age of 40. By the time you're 65, your cellular energy production is operating at perhaps 70% of what it once was. This matters for your heart because the cardiac muscle is one of the most mitochondria-dense tissues in the entire human body. When you flood your system with fast-digesting fructose at night, while your mitochondria are already working at reduced capacity, and your insulin sensitivity is at its daily low point, you create a perfect storm of metabolic stress that the aging heart absorbs silently for years before you ever feel a symptom. A practical note here. If you love juice, drink it in the morning before 10 a.m. When insulin sensitivity is at its peak and your liver is most equipped to handle it. Better yet, eat the whole fruit instead, because the fiber in a whole orange dramatically slows the sugar release and gives your heart an entirely different experience. And pair your morning fruit with a small handful of walnuts. The omega-3 fatty acids in walnuts have been shown in research from the Loma Linda University to enhance the cardiovascular protective compounds found in citrus by up to 30%. Now, number four is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable because this one is deeply embedded in American dinner culture. And honestly, it probably explains why so many people in their 60s and 70s are dealing with heart issues that their doctors keep calling mysterious. The food is red meat, specifically red meat consumed in the evening meal. Let me be precise here, because I know someone in the comments is already typing, but I thought protein was important. You are absolutely right. Protein is not just important after 50, it is critical. Here's the distinction that most people miss entirely. The problem is not protein. The problem is the source, the quantity, and the timing combined with the specific inflammatory compounds found in red meat and what those compounds do inside an aging cardiovascular system at night. A major study conducted by researchers at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health tracking over 37,000 participants across an 8-year period found that individuals over 55 who consumed red meat as their primary evening protein source 4 or more times per week had a 29% higher concentration of a compound called TMAO in their bloodstream. TMAO stands for trimethylamine N oxide, but don't let that intimidate you because it's actually simple to understand. Think of TMAO like rust inside a pipe. When your gut bacteria break down certain compounds in red meat, particularly carnitine and choline found in beef and lamb, they produce TMAO as a byproduct. That TMAO enters your bloodstream and begins oxidizing your arterial walls. Essentially, it accelerates the rusting of your cardiovascular plumbing. And research from the Cleveland Clinic has shown that elevated TMAO levels are directly associated with a 62% increased risk of major cardiac events. Here's why nighttime makes this dramatically worse for aging bodies. Inflammation in the human body follows a natural circadian rhythm. It actually peaks in the late evening and early nighttime hours. After the age of 60, this inflammatory surge becomes more pronounced because of declining levels of melatonin and cortisol regulation. So, when you eat red meat at 7 or 8 p.m., you are introducing pro-inflammatory compounds into a system that is already in its daily inflammatory high tide. The result over months and years is what researchers call chronic low-grade cardiovascular inflammation, and it is one of the primary drivers of arterial plaque buildup and heart disease in adults over 60. I had a patient, I'll call him Gerald, 71 years old, retired school principal from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Gerald came to me with what he described as just getting older, fatigue after dinner, slight breathlessness when he climbed stairs, a persistent feeling of heaviness in his chest that his previous doctor had attributed to stress. When I reviewed his diet, I discovered that Gerald had eaten a red meat dinner, usually a steak or pot roast, 5 to 6 evenings per week for the past decade. He told me his wife cooked it because they both believed the protein was good for his aging muscles. Within 4 months of shifting his evening protein to fish, poultry, and legumes, Gerald's inflammatory markers dropped by 34%, his energy improved dramatically, and the breathlessness resolved. He told me at his 6-month follow-up that he felt like he had borrowed 10 years back from the future. If you do eat red meat, keep it to lunch when your digestive fire is highest. Limit it to 2 or fewer times per week, and always pair it with dark, leafy greens, which contain nitrates that help counteract some of TMAO's arterial damaging effects. Now, if you're finding this information valuable, and I truly hope you are, I want to pause for just one moment and ask you to do something for the people in your life. Hit the subscribe button right now, and if you haven't already, please tap the like button. I know you've heard that before, but here is why it genuinely matters. YouTube's algorithm only shares this kind of research-based health content with new viewers when the engagement signals are strong. Every like tells the algorithm that real people are watching and benefiting. You could be the reason someone's grandfather discovers this video next week. So please subscribe and like, and then let's continue. Because number 3 is one that the food industry has spent millions of dollars making you believe is a perfect bedtime food. And they were wrong. Number 3 is flavored yogurt and sweetened dairy products consumed at night. Now, before you argue with me, understand that plain unsweetened yogurt is genuinely beneficial. I'll explain the difference in a moment. What I'm specifically targeting here is the flavored fruit on the bottom low-fat sweetened yogurt that lines the dairy aisle and gets marketed aggressively to health-conscious older adults. The deception here is almost elegant in its cruelty. These products are positioned as light, healthy, probiotic-rich options. And they do contain probiotics, but many of them also contain between 20 and 29 g of added sugar per serving. Research from Tufts University's Gene Mayer, USDA, Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging, found that adults over 60 who consumed high sugar dairy products in the evening had significantly elevated morning blood glucose levels, a phenomenon researchers now call nocturnal glycemic loading. What happens inside your body during this process is this. That large dose of sugar delivered at night, when your pancreatic insulin response is at its daily minimum, because insulin sensitivity follows a strict daily rhythm, and it is lowest in the evening hours that sugar has nowhere efficient to go. It spikes your blood glucose, triggers an inflammatory cascade, and during the subsequent hours of sleep, when your body should be engaged in cardiovascular repair and cellular recovery, it is instead managing a metabolic emergency. The aging heart is specifically vulnerable here because of what scientists call endothelial dysfunction. That's when the thin inner lining of your blood vessels, called the endothelium, loses its ability to relax and contract properly. Think of it like a garden hose that has lost its flexibility and become brittle. Research from Johns Hopkins University demonstrated that repeated nocturnal blood sugar spikes accelerate endothelial dysfunction by up to 45% in adults over 65 compared to younger populations. This is because the regenerative capacity of endothelial cells declines sharply with age after 70. Your body replaces damaged blood vessel lining cells at roughly half the rate it did at 40. The fix is beautifully simple. If you love yogurt at night, choose plain, full-fat Greek yogurt with no added sugar. Add your own fresh berries and drizzle a small amount of raw honey if you need sweetness. Full-fat dairy at night, consumed in small quantities, actually contains compounds like conjugated linoleic acid that support cardiovascular function. The synergy tip here, add a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon to your plain Greek yogurt. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition found that cinnamon improves overnight insulin sensitivity by up to 19% in adults over 55, which directly counteracts the very mechanism that makes sweet dairy so damaging. Moving now to number 2, and I warned you earlier that one of these would be shocking. This is the one. This is the food that will make you say, "My doctor told me to eat this," and I understand. I'm not here to dismiss your physician. I'm here to add a layer of precision that most general practitioners simply don't have time to discuss in the standard appointment. The food is whole wheat bread or whole grain crackers eaten at night. I can already hear the objections. But it's whole grain, it has fiber. My cardiologist said it was heart healthy. All of that is true in the right context. At the right time of day, with the right companion foods, whole grain products are indeed beneficial. But the research paints a very different picture when these foods are consumed as evening snacks or as part of a late dinner by adults over the age of 55. Here is why. Whole grain bread and crackers, despite having a lower glycemic index than white bread, still carry a significant glycemic load when consumed in the evening without accompanying fat or protein. A study from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, tracking 2,400 adults between the ages of 55 and 78, found that those who consumed grain-based carbohydrates as their primary evening snack had arterial stiffness measurements that were significantly worse than those who consumed the same foods at lunch, even when total daily calories were identical. The time of day was the key variable. This connects to a critical concept called circadian metabolic shifting. After the age of 50, your body's clock-controlled metabolic enzymes, particularly those that manage carbohydrate breakdown and arterial repair, begin to shift. The enzymes responsible for efficiently clearing glucose from the bloodstream become significantly less active after approximately 6 p.m. Meanwhile, a protein called angiotensin II, which drives blood pressure and arterial wall tension, becomes more active during nighttime hours in aging adults. When you add a bolus of glucose from evening grains into this hormonal environment, you are essentially pressing on the gas while the brakes are engaged. I want to tell you about Margaret, 73 years old, former school teacher from Portland, Oregon. Margaret had been having evening crackers with a thin slice of cheese every night for years, what she called her healthy wind-down ritual. Her cholesterol was being managed by medication, but her cardiologist was frustrated because her arterial inflammation markers kept creeping upward despite her apparently clean lifestyle. When she came to me and we reviewed her complete daily nutrition timing, we identified the evening crackers as the likely driver. Margaret switched to an evening snack of a small avocado with pumpkin seeds and found that within 3 months, her C-reactive protein, that's a key marker of arterial inflammation, had dropped by 28%. Her cardiologist called it unexplained improvement. Margaret and I knew exactly why. If you want something in the evening, reach for foods that are fat dominant and protein dominant rather than carbohydrate dominant. Your aging cardiovascular system will process these far more safely during the nighttime hours. A few olives, a small piece of cheese, some almonds. These are evening friendly options that support rather than strain the aging heart. Aging. And now we arrive at number one, the most damaging food for your heart when consumed at night after the age of 50. And I want you to really hear this one because this is the one that has been flying completely under the radar, protected by decades of industry messaging and well-intentioned but incomplete public health guidance. The food is processed sodium, specifically high sodium processed foods like canned soups, packaged snacks, deli meats, frozen meals, soy sauce, and even many so-called healthy protein bars consumed in the evening hours. Now you might say, Dr. Lee, everyone knows salt is bad for the heart. And yes, the general association between high sodium intake and cardiovascular risk is well established. But what most people do not know, what the mainstream conversation almost never addresses, is that the cardiac damage from sodium is profoundly time dependent. And this time dependence becomes dramatically more pronounced with age. Research from the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, studying over 6,800 adults across a 10-year longitudinal trial, found that adults over 60 who consumed their highest daily sodium intake in the evening had a 71% higher rate of left ventricular hypertrophy. That means the enlargement and thickening of the heart's main pumping chamber, compared to those who consumed the same total sodium amount distributed across earlier meals, 71% for the same total amount of salt. The time of day was the deciding factor. Here's the mechanism, and it is genuinely important to understand. Your kidneys, the organs responsible for regulating sodium and fluid balance, follow a strict circadian rhythm. They are most efficient at processing and excreting sodium during the daylight and early afternoon hours. Research from the University of Exeter, published in the journal Cardiovascular Research, demonstrated that after the age of 60, renal sodium processing capacity declines by approximately 35% during the nighttime hours compared to midday function. Think of your kidneys like a recycling plant that runs at full speed during the day but slows to a skeleton crew at night. When you flood that skeleton crew with a massive sodium delivery from a canned soup, a bag of pretzels, or a frozen dinner at 8 p.m., the excess sodium has nowhere to go efficiently. It remains in your bloodstream, drawing fluid into your blood vessels, raising blood pressure, expanding blood volume, and forcing your heart to pump against dramatically increased resistance, all while you are sleeping and completely unaware that your cardiac system is under siege. For aging adults, this is compounded by what researchers call blunted nocturnal dipping. In healthy younger adults, blood pressure naturally drops by 10 to 20% during sleep. This is called the nighttime dip, and it is one of the most important recovery mechanisms the cardiovascular system has. Studies from the American Heart Association have shown that adults over 65 who regularly consume high-sodium evening meals lose this protective nighttime dip. They become what clinicians call non-dippers. And non-dipper status in older adults is independently associated with a 54% increased risk of stroke and a 38% increased risk of heart failure compared to people whose blood pressure dips normally during sleep. The inflammation piece makes this even more alarming. Sodium activates immune cells in blood vessel walls called macrophages. Think of macrophages like overzealous security guards who, when flooded with sodium signals, begin attacking the walls they're supposed to protect. Research from the Max Delbruck Center for Molecular Medicine in Berlin found that high sodium exposure specifically activates inflammatory pathways in arterial tissue, accelerating the very plaque formation that leads to heart attacks. And because systemic inflammation peaks during the nighttime hours in older adults, the combination of evening sodium and the body's inflammatory high tide creates a particularly destructive environment for the aging cardiovascular system. After 75, these effects become even more serious. Research indicates that kidney function declines at a rate of approximately 1% per year after the age of 40, meaning that by 75, many adults are operating on kidneys functioning at 65 to 70% of their peak capacity. The reduced margin for error is significant. A 500 milligram sodium meal that a 35-year-old body handles without incident can translate into hours of elevated blood pressure, fluid retention, and cardiac strain in a 72-year-old body. Here is what you do instead. Your total evening sodium target should be under 500 milliliter red labels because a single can of popular soup can contain 800 to 900 milliliter, and a small bag of salted snacks can easily contain 400 milliliters. Cook with herbs instead of salt in the evening. Rosemary, thyme, and garlic are not just flavorful, they are all independently documented to have vasodilatory effects, meaning they actually help blood vessels relax. If you must use salt, use it at lunch. The synergy tip for your evening meal? Pair low sodium foods with potassium rich options like avocado, spinach, or sweet potato. Potassium and sodium work in a natural opposition inside your body, and research from the Harvard School of Public Health found that high potassium evening intake in adults over 60 partially counteracts the blood pressure effects of moderate sodium consumed earlier in the day. Scientific references for everything I've shared today are linked in the description below. I encourage you to read them. Share them with your physician and start the conversation. Before I close, I need you to hear something that I say to every patient who sits across from me in my office, whether they are 52 or 81. It is never too late. I have seen 74-year-olds reverse decades of arterial damage through precise, consistent dietary choices. I have watched men and women in their late 70s regain energy they thought was simply part of getting old. The heart is one of the most responsive organs in the human body. It wants to heal. It is designed to heal. What it needs is for you to stop unknowingly working against it every night. The foods on this list are not dramatic villains. They are quiet ones. They do their damage slowly, invisibly, one evening meal at a time, over years and decades, until the damage becomes impossible to ignore. But the moment you change what you eat at night, your body begins responding. Not next year, not next month. Within days, the inflammatory cascade shifts. Within weeks, blood pressure rhythms begin to normalize. Within months, the biomarkers that your doctor measures start moving in the right direction. Your independence, your ability to travel, to play with your grandchildren, to wake up without pain, and move through your day with energy and dignity. All of that is connected to the choices you make after dinner tonight. And you now have information that most people your age will never hear. You deserve to live well, not just to live long. And I believe with every fiber of my medical training that what you eat at night is one of the most underestimated levers you have for protecting that quality of life. If this video helped you today, please subscribe to this channel. We release new evidence-based content every week specifically designed for adults over 50 who want to take their health into their own hands. And leave me a comment right now telling me which of these 5 foods surprised you the most. Was it the fruit juice, the whole grain crackers, or did number 1, the sodium timing, completely change the way you think about your evening meals? I want to know. Drop it below. I will be reading every single response because this community, you are why this work matters. I'll see you in the next video.